Shut up and sit down.
It's where the big boys play. Sicw.
4, 3, 2, wonderful.
Hold on tight to me. Hold on tight. Hold on.
Well, that's right, folks. Welcome to Square Read Podcast, episode number 99. Today, our special guest is Travis Orndorff, the son of Mr. Wonderful. Don't forget to go to his YouTube page and check out Hope is Wonderful, his podcast. We will have links in the description. How you doing, Jim? How you doing, Travis?
Well, I'm doing great, but this episode is all about Travis and his dad. So, Travis, how you doing?
You know what? I couldn't be better, and it's an honor to be here. I will openly apologize for the fact that I missed our first podcast schedule. There was a misunderstanding on my end, so I appreciate your graciousness and allowing me to come on today to talk all things wonderful.
Yeah, and all things wonderful, because as much as we idolize and love your father, I've probably watched all your YouTube videos, and I almost kind of feel like I know you too, just because the struggle that you've gone through and what you're doing about it. I'm sure we'll touch up on it later on, but yeah, so your father is Mr. Wonderful. An 80s icon. We know him here in the St. Louis area because he wrestled at Wrestling at the Chase, which, if you live in St. Louis, everyone knows Wrestling at the Chase. It's kind of like where the start of a lot of professional wrestlers happened. Ric Flair, before everyone knew him as a world champion, he started here. Well, he didn't start here, but it was the stepping stone because Sam Mushnick was the president of the NWA. So in order for you to reach that golden world heavyweight championship, you had to step foot in the St. Louis and present yourself to Sam Mushnick. And we actually, on our first time around, we played one of your father's videos of him wrestling at the Chase because it's an iconic video because it was a tag match, and the announcer, who's beloved, got it wrong, and I think it was Harley Race and Bulldog Brown, I think it was, versus your dad and Ted DiBiase. And since Harley Race was the champion and he got pinned, he called out Ted DiBiase as the new world heavyweight champion, not realizing it was a tag match. And the belt, doesn't cross hands that way in a tag match. But so kind of your father was an iconic match here in St. Louis. Of course, that's just one of many iconic matches that your father had, because I believe shortly after he left St. Louis area as a regional territory, he shot up to WWF. When you were born, or when you were growing up as a kid, what stage was your father in? Was he in the WWF? Do you remember that era of him, or do you remember him from like the NWAs and WCW?
So it's, I was born in 1978, and ironically, I was born at, this tells you what a perfectionist I am. I was born at 12:34, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and Brian Blair was actually there that day to see me in the hospital, and they were trying to figure out which child was his, and they pointed to me, which I had this big head of hair and hair all over my body, and Brian, I think, had to convince my dad that I was his son. But my first memories, are from around, and I was 3 or 4 years old. So when I say they're memories, they're very vague. I sometimes wonder if I just saw a picture at some point in time, because my grandfather took so many pictures of us back then. And so, but I feel like I recall some time in Louisiana when we were in Baton Rouge, And then I don't have a great memory of what he was doing when and where he was wrestling. So my real memories are around 1982, 1983. We were living in an apartment complex in Riverdale, Georgia. So I believe at that point he was with the NWA, and then we ended up moving to and buying a home in Fayetteville, Georgia, shortly thereafter, and Dad was at the WWF. So there was kind of a, my understanding is I lived in six or seven states before we settled in Georgia from the time I was born. Because back then they went from territory to territory. Promoters weren't extremely loyal. The wrestlers had very much a brotherhood, and so if a couple of them left, several of them left, and would join a promotion. And so Dad was certainly on his rise to fame. And you got to realize in 1984, when he was wrestling with the WWF, he would have been, that would put him at 35 years old. So his ascension, and even in his prime, what I consider to be his prime, was the ages of 35 to 38 years old, those years from 84 to 87 with the WWF. And then he stepped away from wrestling for several years. We although, it's funny because I've my background in finance and sales and management, I can't fathom my dad buying a bowling center, having no knowledge of anything about bowling, number one, and number two, really not having any kind of business background whatsoever. I mean, I don't think my dad ever wrote a check. So those memories kind of blend together from NWA, WWF, then that time away when we owned the bowling center, and then right back into kind of the independent wrestling where he spent time with Herb Abrams out in California, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and then eventually landing in WCW on two different occasions.
Quick question. Are you still a bowler, and what's your average?
So no, I'm not. I won't go too down the rabbit hole with this, but I had, if you thought my dad's right arm was bad, in fact, when I started, after Dad passed, I went out and acquired the trademark for Mr. Wonderful, and so I had to come up with a company name that would own it, and so I named it One Bad Arm.
Yeah.
And so when I did bowl, at a younger age, really through the age of 17, years old, 18 years old, I bowled occasionally. At the time, my average was in the 200s. It was low 200s, high 190s. And, but, I was at 35 years old, which is kind of where this whole Hope is Wonderful podcast really stems from, is this tragic event in my life. I had been working out the day before. I felt a pop when I was doing my, inclines. I didn't pay much attention to it. There was a little bit of a bruise, but nothing that, I felt physically different. And then the next day, I had been playing on like a league softball team, right? And so I always played catcher, which is fine with me because I am not a big fan of running at all. I hate it, in fact. And so did my father, ironically. But I went out to left field to fill in for somebody who'd gotten a little hurt. And when I threw the softball back in, and it was, I was trying to, get it back into the infield, my bicep came off the bone. And my tricep, which was still attached in those interweave, it spiral fractured my humerus bone. So it just twisted up my humerus bone. So it spiral fractured right at the head of my shoulder. And the bone fragments went through my radial nerve and left my arm paralyzed with radial nerve palsy. So you can see I had 50 staples from elbow to chest, and they reattached everything. But I had wrist drops, so my wrist didn't work for about 3 years. But I stayed in a splint that kept it at a right angle, or up, a 90-degree angle. And then I ended up having all of the tendons down my right arm moved over to the ulnar nerve. So my hand works, but it just doesn't work up top. So
Oh.
yeah, no bowling on my end.
Yeah.
You know, there were so many things and attributes of my father I, you know, had wanted as a child. This was not one of them at all. No, not at all. You know, so one bad arm seemed appropriate for the name of the company since we both had experienced some damage.
Well, so your dad actually had a lot of accolades in other sports before even wrestling was even a thought in his mind. I know in other podcasts you were talking about what is he wasn't he a runner? Didn't you say he was a runner?
No, he was a discus thrower. He was a shot putter and broad jump. And so no races to my knowledge. So he actually, you know, in talking to him at a younger age, he always thought baseball was his best sport. And so he played baseball. He played obviously he played football. And then, you know, back then, you know, baseball scholarships weren't as popular, and they didn't really have one available at the University of Tampa, which now doesn't have a football team, but they had a football team back then, and you know, because there was no Tampa Bay Bucks, so he went and played for University of Tampa to stay close to home. He had gotten my mom pregnant at 18 years old, got married, had a kid, and went and played football at the University of Tampa. He held records in track and field for several years, and I mean, like, I think the broad jump, I might be wrong because I have to go based on what sometimes I'm told, because finding some of this information isn't easy. But I think he held it to like the early 2000s. So it was like 32 years. And, you know, the discus and the shot put, those were different. But even in college, I have an article where he and a friend decided randomly, because they didn't have anybody to compete in a rowing like division. I don't know what division it was, but it was, you know, the college division, might have been Division III for all I know. But they just decided randomly to enter and won that year. They were the champion. And I don't think he practiced. Like, they just said, we'll go do it. He learned the form and went out and did it. And I think that's the one thing that most people would be surprised by. They know his body size, right? But he was 205 in high school. Like, he looked like he had eaten a Marine, you know, when he was 18, 19 years old. And so his kind of normal weight at that age was, you know, and football was like 220, 225. You know, he didn't put on the other muscle mass. Obviously, there were special vitamins available at that point in time. But, you know, his athleticism, if you go back and watch some of his 70s matches, he does some flips and stuff. Like he did a flip over, I can't remember who it was, but it was he was slinging him into the ropes and then did a flip over him. And there's one of him in the WWF where he had gone out of the ring, you know, and he's grabbing onto the top rope and he pulls himself back in over the rope.
Oh yeah.
I mean, his I think people know his strength. I don't think people realize how incredibly like twitch quick he could be. And, you know, even going back to when he started wrestling and how he got into it, you know, they took him down to a place in Tampa and he was going to be trained by Hiro Matsuda. It's kind of a relationship my grandfather had, a connection, and got him in. And so they had told him to do like 1,000 Hindu squats. And Dad had done those for years. And I guess that burned out every other person that ever tried out. Well, he started doing them. And the way he would do them, when he came up, he would leap forward and then come back and do them again. So he was doing these leaping Hindu squats, and everybody just looking at him like, what is wrong with him? We didn't ask him to go that far. And he went till he stopped. There's rumor, and it's again, some of this is, I always tell people when people ask about wrestling stories, I'm like, there are 10 people that have heard this story, and each of them has 10 versions. So there's 100 versions of this story. But my understanding is one time they challenged him, and I think he got to 2,000 without stopping.
Oh,
That's
the
crazy.
soreness in his knees had to be insane.
Look at his pile drivers. If you
Yeah.
really pay attention, and I always, I have all due respect for everybody, unless you have a bad opinion. No, I'm just kidding. But I hear people say, "Who has the best pile driver?" And somebody will say Jerry Lawler, and I'm like, "Yeah, that one's cute. It looks like what I look like when I sit down in a chair." My dad would come off he would leap up carrying somebody 250 pounds, and he would leap off of the ground, level out, and then you can always see him lean back to protect the wrestler.
Yeah.
And because to my knowledge, and I've asked around, no person I know of has ever been injured by one of my dad's pile drivers, and he was not stingy with them, during those times. So his leg strength. One last thing, and we can go on, but when we would go to the gym, and I would go every once in a while because I hated it. Because, and if I ever hear somebody say one more rep, I'm just telling you, I'm going to find like Jason Bourne and have him take him out. But, like as a child going to the gym, it was always one more rep. But he did legs every single time he went into a gym. Even if it was only 4 sets of leg extensions, he did legs every single time. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think I ever saw him squat.
Wow.
I mean, he did calves. He would do calves and legs were just kind of almost his warm up. I caught him on the bike once, which was hilarious because he looked really uncomfortable.
That is so weird too, because most weight. Oh man, I'm having a brain lapse here. Weightlifters, they only schedule legs like once, maybe twice tops during the week, and the rest, they work the upper chest and the arms and everything. But to do legs every time, that.
And I'm not his full leg workout. You were gonna crawl everywhere you went. You would beg God for constipation so you didn't have to sit down to go to the bathroom because it just and I was my mom recently passed. I'm sitting in the lobby with my family, and we all started complaining about doing legs with Dad because you never got a rest. But he always said those are your foundation. He said you build from your foundation. He said if your legs are strong, your back will be strong. When your back is strong, your arms get strong. So to me, he was from the bottom up, not from the top down. And this is just my own observation. I've seen some amazing athletes, professional wrestlers, bodybuilders. Lee Haney and Arnold Schwarzenegger both made comments about my dad. And Lee Haney, I heard this the other day from my mentor Hugh Kirby. He said Lee Haney saw him and said, "You need to do 2 things when you get done with this workout: kiss your mama and thank God, because you have a gift." And that's coming from an 8-time Olympian, right? Or,
Yeah.
And so Mr. Olympia. So he was symmetrical. If you look at him until he hurt his arm, there really wasn't a muscle on his body that wasn't developed, and yet he could move the way he did in a ring in a way that most people at that size. In modern day, I've seen it a little bit different, but he had some crazy athleticism that clearly I did not inherit.
Yeah. I mean, talking about your dad, you always hear that he had a second or a third gear where everyone else would be exhausted in the ring. He could still run another mile, because he had that extra spruce in his step, I guess you would say. But yeah, that's so what actually, I mean, your dad had this great football career in college, and then he actually played a little pro ball. What changed his mindset into going into wrestling? Because I would think football was probably right up there with the money situation, being made in wrestling at that time.
So he got drafted by the Saints. Remember the draft, I think back then was like 13 or 14 rounds. It wasn't the shorter number of, not 7 rounds like it is today. And so he was a fullback. And he had to leave my mom, and he had to leave Tampa, and he had to change and be in New Orleans, and he did not. And ironically, we traveled all the time, but at that point, he would have been 22 years old. And so while he looked like a man, he was still a baby, right?
Yeah.
And so when this is the story though, when and I love it when people I see people make even they'll even quote me with stuff, and I'm like that was like one part of this story. Like I see these stories come out, I'm like there's so many errors that you just give up because there's no actually journalistic integrity anymore to go, hey, I'm going to go to this source and better understand and ask more questions. No, instead I'm just going to make a video with what I was able to get on Google. So Dad went to the New Orleans Saints. He was drafted, and Dad hated being embarrassed. He was actually very shy. I'm convinced, and he always told me he gave Roddy Piper and Bobby Heenan the credit for him getting comfortable in front of a mic. He could be dismissive, and I've seen some of those in the 80s, but he wasn't nearly as comfortable with a mic at that time of his career, even at WWF. But they required the rookies to sing a song in front of everybody before they ate at lunchtime. After their first practice, and so he had to sing "I'm a Little Teapot," and he hated it so much that he quit. And in talking to him, I remember him saying, "Travis, I was so burnt out. I think I don't know if it was Earl Bruce but there was a coach, and I certainly don't want to speak negatively about somebody, but there was a coach at the University of Tampa that just kind of took the life out of him as far as his passion for football. So he ended up going back to Tampa, and my grandfather, my mom's dad, and my dad were really close. They were living there at the time when he was transitioning. So he worked at MetLife, and it's a Saturday morning. Dad is watching wrestling, and of course, Dad was never going to do anything kind of with his the practical education skills, right? He struggled with reading at times, but he was watching wrestling and said to my grandfather, my dad was working for MetLife for a short period. He said to my grandfather, "I can do that," and my grandfather was like, "Great," because and my grandfather said it later, but didn't say it in the moment because he was going to have to fire him because he was not doing well at MetLife. And so he was like, "Absolutely, I'll get you a tryout." And so he got him a tryout that Monday, and the rest was history. But I'll go back to, he was so introverted that if you watch the early interviews with my dad, and I do believe they came off as arrogant, but he never looked at the camera. It was always his back. I believe that was still him getting comfortable being in front of a mic and then being center. So going back to his wrestling, Bill Watts was going to fire him at one point in time. This is the Brandon Bull. He was a mid card. And Bill looked at him and said, "Paul, you need to show me something tonight or you're not wrestling next week." And I think my dad had repressed, certainly had a rough childhood. And then he just flipped a switch that he never turned off. And when he got into that ring, when he came out, Bill was like, "That's what I needed to see." And, Bill Watts was no joke.
Yeah.
He had high expectations, but if you delivered, he took care of you. And I think in many ways treated him like a son. But Dad turned that gear on, let that demon out, and when he did, it paved the way for his entire career.
Man, and not to backtrack too, but Hiro. I always butcher his last name.
Matsuda.
That's the same guy that trained Hulk Hogan, and there's always that story out there that they wanted to push Hogan to see if he was wanting to really be a wrestler, and somehow snapped his ankle. I mean, there's a wild story that they broke his leg, but I think it was really just his ankle.
I heard it got amputated at one point. I mean, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, that's the thing I love about wrestling is there's never an end to how dramatic it gets. Like, I've watched people do an interview And then like 2 weeks later, it's different. It's like there were 75 people there, and the next time it's 150 people there. So I don't know. My dad always called him Terry, right? He had known him from, Terry was a few years younger, and he knew him from that tree. And Dad and Terry wrestled as tag teams over in Japan for I will say this. You get a lot of negative press about Hulk Hogan, especially in today's climate. I stay away from quarrelsome types of conversations because they add no value. What I will tell you is, if he couldn't wrestle, Hulk Hogan, there's no way on God's green earth he would have made it through Japan, because they did not accept less than your absolute best. You go back and watch those matches. Hulk Hogan does more wrestling than you saw him do in the 80s. In the 80s, he had learned a format. He was also 300 pounds. He was very, very smart in how he did it. He didn't injure himself. That's why he had this long career. So I think he understood the damage that was happening from going at it at the intensity level my dad did. There was a drawback, and Terry had a great career, but he actually was one heck of a wrestler. You may not like his later matches, but go back to the 70s. It's a different animal.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. How Japan, how he had two different styles when he was working Japan and when he was working the U.S. It was totally different. And yes, they make you have that style or be able to wrestle, at least over in Japan. But what I was getting at is, so the teacher hurt Hogan to see if he had the fortitude to come back. But having your dad do the 2,000 Hindu squats, I mean, I think that's worse. I've had to do plenty of Hindu squats in my time, and I just hate them. So worst things possible. But it's great. So how long did it take your dad to go through the training from him?
I don't know. Those are some of those memories that are a little bit of a blur,
Okay.
And to be honest with you, like, I get this, this happens because obviously I do and have a legacy social media pages for my dad on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. And a lot of it is clips, some of the ones that you guys have been showing tonight. But, I get often asked, like, what did your dad say about that match? And I mean this with all due respect. Like, we didn't talk about wrestling. Like, that was not like, Dad talked more about hunting and, the gym. Now, we talked about gym and diet like all the time, every meal. He would talk about how, because growing up, we didn't have, and I say it every time, we didn't have salt and butter on the table. We weren't allowed to have that. We weren't allowed to drink anything while we were eating. Even if you dislike something, you were required to take a bite. It's translated to me being and eating, a very, very healthy diet that most people would go nuts if they had to eat like I do, because I don't eat any sugar or any processed foods but those things were instilled in me at such a young age that you just end up falling back on what you know. So I'm very grateful for it. But yeah, Dad was just a different animal altogether. And so wrestling matches, when I was 21, I wanted my dad to go have a beer with me, and he didn't want to go because I had never seen my dad drink. Wow. my entire life. Now, I would find beer bottles every once in a while, but it wasn't like a lot. Like, it'd be, like here and there in the woodshed. I probably could count them on one hand, right? So in 21 years, my dad had a glass of wine every now and then. Never did I see him drunk or even have more than one. But I got him to take me to have a beer, and blew me away because he got a shot of Jack Daniels. And I was like, what? And so that was when we started to have some real honest conversations about things that people ask me, but my perspective and how I ask the question probably doesn't fit into the narrative you want to hear, because it wasn't specifics about a person or, like I remember sitting with him and going, Dad, I've always wanted to know, did you ever cut yourself with, razors as they did bleed? He's like, oh, hell no, I was too pretty for that. And I was like, well, where'd you get your scars from? And he's like, oh man, this one was from like a grandmother in Shreveport, Louisiana, as he was leaving. Like they were the most boring story, like hilarious and very, like appropriate, but it was these stories about things that happened with walking out of a ring. And like one time they were wrestling and they had so much heat, they were throwing darts in the ring. One landed at his foot. Like it was story. Now he hit his head a couple of times, and there was one time he had cut his head and he let it, he played it out for that match. But these stories about wrestling were things like, hey, where did this come from? What's the real deal behind this? And one of the questions I asked was, what was it like to walk out, in Michigan when it was anticipated to have 12,000 people show up and 70,000 people are present, and you're walking out to wrestle, Hulk Hogan, which again for me is funny because they were, like they grew up together, and I mean in reality because they were both like 24 years old when they met, right? And he looked at me and he said, "There is no high that will ever compare to walking out to the ring that night and half the crowd cheering for me, even though I was the heel." And he said, "There's nothing that'll ever replace it." He said, "There's no drug, there's no experience, there's no way to describe that feeling." And then, like I jokingly said, I was like, "Better than when I was born?" He goes, "Oh yeah." I didn't hesitate either. Like.
Well, and that's one thing that's great about your dad is, nowadays, most of the wrestlers, we call them in-betweeners. Like they're a bad guy, good guy, all in the same match. But your dad was probably one of the first ones that was a great heel, and then at the same time, a great baby. And the fans pretty much turned him that way. And I think that's the best way for it to happen is the fans get behind you so much, regardless what the promoter wants or even sometimes what the wrestler wants. The fans are going to turn you how they want you. And that whole WrestleMania moment, well, the first 3 years of it, with him being such, going in as the bad guy, but slowly the fans were turning him baby, and then they had all that Hulk Hogan versus Paul matches, and like you said, your dad was getting a lot of cheers too. So
we have clips that we put up, of these matches, and I listen. Like he's my dad. That was his job. I did not watch my dad's job, right? So I didn't grow up a wrestling fan, like, and he didn't really want me around it, so it was kind of avoided. Like it wasn't encouraged. I think I watched, when I went to the matches, I sat in the dressing room with the guys. So for them to be heroes of mine would not have happened. They were naked and sweaty and disgusting, right? Like these were not images that would ever bring you to go, I want to be like that guy. I'm like, I want to do anything but this job, whatever they're doing, tell me how to do the opposite and I'll do it. But when you'll see these clips, and like one of them we recently did, but dad is pile driving a guy, he pile drives him, and then Bobby Heenan gets in the ring and Bobby distracts the ref and he pile drives him again. And you can see those fans going nuts, like off the charts, loving it. And this is what I would say. I have watched some wrestling in my life. And I even recently went to a Raw Monday night show. Dad's is working as a legend now within the WWE organization, or that's back alive. And I actually wore his blue robe from WrestleMania 2. Nobody, like, people thought, like, did people come talk to you? I was like, I didn't announce I was his son, and I certainly didn't tell anybody it was real. I just went in to have some fun and to sit back and watch, right? Yeah. But when I watch the wrestling and God bless them. It's a different product, as is everything. Nothing is like it was when we were kids, and that's perfectly fine. We don't have to crap on them for that reason, But when I watched those guys and when I saw them throw punches, like I can reflect and go, that does not look like what my dad did for a living.
Yeah.
Because my dad looked like, number one, he could kill you, and number two, was trying to. He threw some phenomenal punches. He was an excellent tactician in the ring, and I think people turned on him to become a babyface because they believed him. And belief is something that it comes out of you whether you like it or not. When you start seeing somebody that is really giving you a good product, you want to be grateful for it. Like we all want to believe it's real. He kept the kayfabe alive inside the ring when the doubts were coming, because that time frame was when Hollywood was getting involved, and so there was this evolution. And when you saw him go in the ring, you're like, that dude, he just killed him. I believe that was real, and that is invaluable in today's day and age, is to that belief, right?
Yes. And a lot of times we say that's what's missing in today's product. I wouldn't say I'm good friends, but I work with Bob Orton Jr. Pretty much every week. He has a school here in St. Louis, and I'm one of his teachers. So he's constantly in the ring with us, and if I'm teaching the wrong move or how to get into the move, he'll jump up there and take over and everything. But one of the things that I still give him credit for, and he just wrestled 2 weeks ago, and his punches still look like he can knock your damn head off. And the way he'll watch a student and pick out all the details of what he should or should not be doing is still great to me, because it's like we got a new generation. I'm kind of an older generation, and then we got Bob's generation. So I'm trying to teach from my perspective. Of course, all the new kids, they want to know all these new fancy moves, and me and Bob both agree, no. You got to learn how to wrestle and look good first before you can start adapting to, jumping off the top rope and doing all this kind of floppy
Well,
stuff.
they miss those spots 50% of the time, if not more. Like you see him live, it's like, oh, he was like a foot away. Like, like, no offense, like that's a hard thing to do, and you're not Cirque du Soleil. Like you're a professional wrestler, right? And so like you're not a gymnast. It's it's really cool. You can do a front flip, but like that was always the last thing you did, and you did it once. There was a build up to that point, and that was your finish, right? And often you missed it, and that was how the heel won, right? So I actually heard this story. God, this might have been a week ago. Dad was at in 2016. I mean, this is maybe 17. I can't remember where he was at. I wish I had the details. They all run together in my age, but Dad, came out. And he did a little spot. I think it might have been Canada, and he came out and he did a spot like where he was, Mr. Wonderful was getting involved, and he was, fans, and it was kind of playing it. And then Dad ended up doing like one of his elbow drops that he did, dancing and stuff, did elbow drop. Well, evidently went over well. And so he decided to repeat it. But my dad was in the back room, and, unassuming, he could have left and gone back to the hotel. And the guys finished the match and came in, and he goes, why'd you chop him? He's like, what? He said, why did you chop him? And the kid started to explain it. He's like, if you were in a fist fight, would you have chopped him? And they kind of were like, what? And he was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that's what you do when you're trying to embarrass them because they're out of it, not when you're going back and forth. And so even at that age, which would have been at the time probably 66 years old, like there were these little details that those guys knew you didn't do that next because there was a reason why you did the chops. It was to and show this level of, you're so weak that I can just do these, or
Yeah.
whatever. But those pieces and how you put that puzzle together, like, God bless those guys. They keep in mind, they used to have to do carning so they could call out their spots without people understanding. That's how close the chairs were. So
Yeah.
it was a different product for a different time. TVs don't catch what you do live. By the way, I'm gonna tell Elaine, Bob's wife. She and I sometimes message on Twitter. I'm gonna let her know he's getting in the ring still. Not really, but
don't get him in trouble now. We need it.
listen, I'm sure he does that on his own.
Yeah.
But no, that they are both Bob, and I've spent very little time, but I did spend time with Bob before. And I've never met his wife, but she is more than a blessing. Just even the little interactions I've had. So to be around, he's royalty. Like, we call them legends, and that I'm tired of that word, because that doesn't describe, in my mind, what those guys created, because it didn't exist. Like, they laid the foundation. It's like the Green Bay Packers of the Super Bowl 1 and 2. Like, that franchise is as popular as it is because of what those guys, Bart Starr and did in the 60s and 70s. Like, they laid the foundation for the product you consume every week. And the Bob Ortons of the world, the Tito Santanas, even the jobs like jobber guys like Iron Mike Sharp.
Sharp.
Like, you look at Rudy Diamond, Special Delivery Jones, Dick the Bruiser. Like, those guys created an industry, that went from the circus to now multiple nights per week with multiple millionaires.
Yes. And that's what I love about you, because without you, and not even that you're his son, you're keeping your father's memories alive. And when WWE first came out with their network, and they had to fill the time, so they put all the back catalog in. That was the best time right there. It's because it was like revisiting what got you there. But it's kind of like now that they switched to, not being on a forgot about the past. But you're keeping your dad's name alive. I'm trying to document stuff for Bob and keep him out there. And speaking of Elaine, I posted his last match because see, now not my dog's going to start barking. But I recorded his last match that he had and posted it on Facebook, and was going through the whole spiel of Bob still has it, and pepping him up, and Elaine gets on and laughs at it. I was like, oh my God, you're not helping, Elaine. But that's what I love.
I want to share this with you, and if I get emotional, just know that it's out of a place of gratitude, right? So when my dad passed, that year after was the worst year of my life. Like, I lost my identity, and it had nothing to do with Mr. Wonderful or wrestling. I thought that was part of it, because being Mr. Wonderful's son was a lot easier than being Travis Orndorff. Like, Travis Orndorff had the real life that comes with wrestling. My brother got in a lot of trouble. In fact, the only time I've ever been handcuffed was they thought I was my brother, and I was driving my dad's car, and the registration's Paul Orndorff Jr., because dad's a junior, and they thought I was my brother, right? So my brother was getting in a lot of trouble. My mom was having issues, and money could ebb and flow. There were times that I was in a very nice private school, and then I'd go somewhere else, and I had to change schools, and I don't have more than a couple of shirts to wear. Like, there was this life that I led, and I'm fortunate that I was still afforded all the opportunities I did, But that led, down the road. If you know anything about me, I'm very transparent. Led me down the road of alcohol, and then there was, I mentioned my arm, but from the time I was 9, I had severe chronic pain, and they've never actually been able to diagnose it, but they didn't expect me to live when I was 9.
Oh.
And I was 82 pounds. I just gotten my black belt in karate, and I lost 30 pounds. So I got down to 52 pounds, and the doctors were like, we can't get him to recover. And then one day I woke up and I had to learn how to walk again. Right. So life really kind of had, not the appearance of what people think it's like to grow up celebrity in a small town. And some of it is self-induced because my identity was, everybody loved my dad. Well, that meant you loved me because of dad. I will attach to that so that I don't have to tell you all the, demons I am dealing with, and every experience I'm having that I'm having to act like aren't happening. Right. Because it's kayfabe. And so that journey for me was really difficult, but I got a message from somebody after I had announced his passing, and there was a whole story to even me getting custody of my father, a power of attorney, and so there was perception, which, to be honest with you, I look back on how could I have grown and done different, but those are all the skills I had at the time, and I was really angry, and I was hurt and lied to, and so I reacted. And could I have done it different? I don't know. All I know is it worked, and I got the power of attorney from my dad from the social workers, right? So I got a message, and somebody said, "Hey, would you be open to doing something, on social media for your dad?" And I said yes, but the rule is it has to be from my eyes. Like I can't share him with the world the way I did before. That the game's changed. And I use this analogy. I don't think it's a coincidence that when Jesus started his ministry, it was after his father Joseph had died. Because when I lost my dad, man, when I tell you you have no foundation to live on at that point, if you don't have something outside of yourself, I did not want to die, but I can tell you that was not living. And just like tears, like uncontrollable, could not figure it out. And let me tell you who reached out: the fans. We started doing those pages. I started sharing my heart, which is my way of grieving, and people started to talk to me. Not, I always say people follow me because of who my dad is, and I'm okay with it. But you're going to get the message that I feel like I have from that time with my father. And so these fans started reaching out to me. And the backstory of this is I hated wrestling fans. I couldn't stand you at all.
Yeah.
You took my daddy away, right? I would, we'd be at dinner and somebody's coming over, and then we're spending 30 minutes as he goes through, everywhere signing autographs, which he got it. And then these people started to embrace me, my humanity, my grief. And so from there was this hope that maybe life was a little different than I expected. And from there, as we started doing this, it hit me like a Mack truck. Oh my gosh, if these guys aren't fans of my dad, I don't have a childhood. They paid my bills. Oh my gosh, when my dad was, reaching out to these people, there's stories that'll bring me to tears of things my dad did as a human being when he was a wrestler, that he sat down with, young people and gave them a workout routine and told them to pay attention in school. And then there's stories of him being in place, and they're like, I feel like I knew you because when you were playing baseball and I'm like, I don't even know who this person is. And they know my baseball team when I was 9 and 10, because my dad, so this whole world that blew up on me, and I rebuilt my life around my faith and around connection and around, being of service to other people. What is my dad did through a match? I now do with my words and actions and times like this where I get to share. Man, he was an amazing father, but the truth is he was a great man with more flaws than I can count, that was open and willing to accept that he had those flaws. And
Yeah.
and he made me who I am today in many ways, because when I was a child, he came to faith in Jesus Christ. And I remember him speaking, and the last part of his testimony, he pointed up and said, "He is Mr. Wonderful." I never forgot that. And I needed it
Yeah.
after he passed.
Sorry,
you get me excited.
No, you're fine, because there's a lot to unpack here. I don't know the story. I mean, I've seen your videos, and I know your father was it was more of like not a nursing home, but it was
He was
like
abandoned in a hospital. He was abandoned.
How did that happen? Because I know he didn't want to live with you, but he didn't want to be a burden to anyone. How did he?
So his mind was, yeah. So so there had been, somebody in my family attacked my dad in 2014, and I was at Hilton Head with my family, and I, immediately drove back and took him in, and I had filed adult protection services against that household. Which included my mother, who was very angry. She struggled with addiction herself.
Okay.
And it just continued to get worse as she got older. I made Dad a promise I would wait to share. He's like, "You can share everything, but wait till everybody's gone, so it doesn't embarrass anybody." And I loved my mother, but she had a demon, and it lasted for as long as I can remember. I've had a hard time looking back and finding memories where that her struggle didn't manifest, and what I thought was normal, and I was desensitized to pain pills and different things in my life. Like, I come to realize later on, I'm like, oh, that's addiction. That's not what normal people grow up around, right? So so COVID had happened. I had gotten COVID a couple times. We would call and check in. I went and visited. Brian Blair would go visit, and we were calling adult protection services every year, pretty much. I was in touch with them, and they would say they would go out, and they, never hear back. It just was it wasn't great. Well, at this point, I couldn't find Dad, and I finally pinned, no pun intended, my mom down to find out where he's at, and he was at Grady Memorial Hospital. So I made arrangements. It took me a couple weeks before they would even let me in. I got up there, and I walked in, and I was like, "Oh my God!" And I immediately shot that video because I wanted proof. One, I didn't know if they let me back in, but I went out to that nurse's station, and I rose holy hell. I freaked out. I was like, I want a director here right now. I started Googling on my phone, like, who's in charge of a hospital, and they would not support anything, but they told me that they had been calling the police in Fayette County because my mom wouldn't answer the phone. And so, come to find out, my mom and two of my nieces, who have also, at the time, were both incarcerated and are now, those were the 3 points of contact to reach. And I wasn't even on there. So when Dad had come to me before that, he couldn't remember where the bathroom was. He just wanted to be home. And his mind, I remember when I had the autopsy done by Dr. Amalu from the movie, Will Smith played him in Concussion. He's really kind of the forefather of that CTE. The guy that did the autopsy, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who worked at the funeral home, and he said, "Travis, the guy said your dad didn't know who he was for the last 20 years. His brain had shriveled up so much." And I said, "That's impossible. I've talked to him so many times." Well, I was able to get his journals. He was a doodler, right? And there was a phone number for me, a cell phone number. It had my name, and it had question marks next to it, and it said son. And it was as if he was questioning if I was his son. And you start to put these pieces together. But I got the video. I told them I was going to report them to the news if they would not give me support, because they were refusing me help. And of course, being his son doesn't do anything. But it was his wife. I called the police. I called the fire department to find out how many times the police had gone out there. Ultimately, somebody saw the video and said, we will make arrangements. And so the arrangements were, there was a lady, I won't say where she was because I'm pretty sure what we did we weren't supposed to do, but
Yeah.
she took him in. I went up there. I took him to get a haircut. I got him cleaned up, and I took my mom with me, right? And at that point, I said, Mom, I'm the point of contact. If anything is needed, put me on there. And when she filled out the paperwork, the lady that owned it, me and her were already, like, we had already, talked. And so she filled out the paperwork, and I go in. She goes, Travis. I said, she goes, your phone number and name aren't on here. She goes, I can't do anything. I said, I'll call the social worker. So there was a social worker at the hospital. She ended up talking to the lady that ran the facility. And so we made arrangements. And the way that it worked was I had to go be there with him at the hospital. I would be the only point of contact because they would reach out. She didn't answer. And in doing that, I was able to get custody of my dad. So that Sunday they put him in the hospital. I started to leave to go get him. They go, nope, you got to come back tomorrow and you got to take him. So I go pick him up that Monday morning. I took him to Northside Hospital. The doctor looks at me and goes, Travis, your dad is asphyxiating every time he drinks anything. The only thing we can do is, does he have an advance directive? And I said, no. I said, but he does not want to live on tubes. And he goes, well, he's here, but he's not here. And so it was either put a pump in his stomach. But if he were to drink or eat anything, the fear was it would, because his throat wasn't opening up. His brain wasn't telling his throat to open up, so it would go down. He was like, he's going to choke and have a horrible death because the food or something is going to end up in his lungs. He's like, so at that point, I signed up. I signed up with hospice. Hospice came over and they were like, we can take him. And I said, absolutely not. They said, well, somebody's got to clean him. And I said, I got it. And you don't know what you got until something happens, by the way. Like, my family came over. He went to the bathroom on himself. And if you had told me in that moment, I would jump to it. I would have been, man, that's 20/80, 80% that I'm going to freak out. And it happened. And my family ran out of the room and I wouldn't grab some gloves. And so through that process that he stayed with me, I slept downstairs next to him pretty much every day until, I think I took one time I slept in the bed in the afternoon to try to rest. But, he stayed there with me. And when he took his last breath, me and my niece, who I consider my sister, and my nephew, were there till he passed. And so just so you know, like, forgiveness is probably the most difficult thing you will ever do, because it means you have to, yes, you remember, but you have to get to a point, you got to let go, and you got to get to the point where it doesn't physically affect you. So I actually went to this class on forgiveness. I tried to build a relationship with my mom because I had completely shut her out. Like, I didn't let her make any arrangements. I didn't talk to her at the funeral. Like, when I use the word hate, like I was screaming very often. And so I started to put myself in different shoes because I certainly need forgiveness for some of the things I did. But I went to a class at church and the guy just kind of looked at me and goes, you want to be forgiven, but you can't forgive. I was like, oh, crap. So, I went and started spending time with her. I started taking her to church. And at first I could barely sit on the same pew. And then over several weeks, I was able to sit next to her and hold her hand. And so at that point in time, I looked at her and I said, hey, it's never too late. And she said, it is for me. And that was kind of the end of that. But, I let go of that anger and what happened. And, she was sick. She had a medical condition that most of us think you can power your way out of, which is, substance abuse. And ultimately, I love my mother, but that was her struggle. And that was, there's no need for kayfabe anymore. Right. Like, that doesn't help anybody.
Right. Yeah. And wow. I mean, that's
sorry. I know I have a problem with talking.
Oh, no. Not that I had the same situation that you had, but I know what it's like to lose your father and to be with him when he takes the last breath. Because I was the one that had to decide to pull the plug. And when you talk about that, and I always hated the fact that I had to make the decision, because I'm the younger sibling, but I was the only one around, and I could not get over the fact that the hospital said that it had come to that, because my father had cancer, and it was cancer in his blood, which anywhere that blood traveled, he would get cancer everywhere. So he got it in the liver, got it in his bones. He just had it everywhere. And I talk a little bit about it on the podcast before, with his experimental drugs that they were giving him. He would perk up and he would be talking to him like he never skipped a beat, never forgot anything. But 3 days after that, maybe 4 days, he would start acting like a child. And then you knew when he needed his next dose because he was just like a vegetable. And I never, even though I had to make that decision, I was not prepared to make that decision mentally, and it screwed me up for a while. Because one of the things that I took from one of your interviews before is you said he was my best friend. He was the person I could tell anything to, and he wouldn't judge me. That was my father as well. Because towards the end, that's all you think about. That's who you're around. That's your life. And different things come out. You can tell him anything. He could tell me anything because, there's some stories that from their marriage, my mom and my father, they split up and everything. And there's a whole bunch of stuff I didn't know. And then when he was coming towards his end, he let me know more than what I really wanted to know. But I mean, it's tough. And when you called out your age, we're the same age. And
You look so much older, and you used an AOL account. How are we the same age? I told you I was going to slide it in there.
Oh, damn. Mental joke. I mean, not a mental joke, but a joke. My email kept going into his spam. And I said, it's probably because it's AOL. It's an old email address, but I'm old, so I use it. And he told me he was going to throw it in there, and I didn't know when. But
well, here's what I do want to share with you, because you hit on something, I think, that, peel back the layer of that. And I had to come to this place for myself. Like I always tell people, I can make suggestions. I can tell you what worked for me, but that's me. Like I just know, but I can tell you it worked. I'm honest about, I can tell you what doesn't work. What doesn't work is numbing that pain
right.
with alcohol, drugs, or sex, or anything else like that's. And I don't think that's what life was intended to be. I hear people all the time say their attention deficit. I'm like, what'd you score on the TAMS? And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, there's a test for this. Like I've taken it, and so we don't have ADHD. We have a food preservative and chemical problem. We have a reward system hack with dopamine and with the algorithms. Like we're not used to sitting still. But I want to share, James, I'm the younger brother as well. So my brother is 9 years older than me. And I had to make the decision with my mom too. And we still communicated. There was no ill will. Like every once in a while I had to deal with my ego, right? Because, I can easily say I'm a better person if I start, but the reality is I'm not. I'm just a person. But I did not anticipate what I walked into at Christmas. Like she had an issue, but it turns out she had broken her back once. She got the pills and left. She didn't stay for rehab. A couple weeks later, she fell. She broke her hip, got the pills and left, didn't stay for rehab, got RSV, went back to the hospital, got the pills and left. and then went back in and she never came out. And so I walk in and I remember looking at her, I go, she looks worse alive than Dad did the day he passed. Like it was so, and so they had been trying to reach somebody. Nobody gave my phone number. She was on a ventilator, and they looked at me and they same question: is she on an advanced directive? And I said no, and she wouldn't want to be on tubes. What are the chances of any type of recovery? Because what I'm seeing, it doesn't look like it's possible. What I learned is, James, and I don't mean to take anything away from you in this matter, but we didn't decide. Like death is batting 1,000. There's only one person I heard that was resurrected. Like other than that, we didn't make that decision. We just had to face it when everybody else hid from it. And that's not because they hid from it for whatever reason. But I'm not God. I didn't make the decision he was going to live or die. That was already decided a long time ago in history. But what we did decide to do is put aside our selfishness, our wants, and we did what we thought was best for our loved one so that they weren't in pain. Because I had to deliver every single dose of morphine. And I would deal with guilt. Like, am I doing the right thing? And it messed me up too. Like, again, there was a full year of just turmoil, having to face life in a different way. And again, my dad was Mr. Wonderful, but you just don't know how much I loved him for being my dad, right?
Yeah.
Like we had so much fun. He was hilarious. He also had a short temper. And when he would start getting mad, I would start laughing. Then he would get pissed and then he would start laughing. And so it was always the thing. People were like, he just acts different around you. And I'm like, well, we just got that thing, right? So doing life without him, that's what I struggled with, was because, like I didn't want him to go. But we never made that decision. We did choose to not put ourselves first and not, keeping somebody alive so you feel better. That's a bad decision, right?
Yeah.
Like, but they were going to pass. We just chose how to do it in a way that they would have wanted, which was certainly not to do it in pain. Because my dad fell asleep with me holding his hand and kissing his cheek.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have nothing to add to that because I haven't had to go through that. So
yeah, I was hugging
There's
him.
nothing we can say that will prepare you. Zero. I've heard there's nothing that will explain it until it happens. And when it happens, you have a choice. And I think most people understand this, that if you have a choice how you live the rest of your life after that. Because I don't think, other than the loss of a child, there's
no, my
nothing
family,
more.
my family's all dead. It's just I didn't have to make all the any of the calls.
Well, let's turn this around. Celebrating your dad. He was the NWA Southern Heavyweight Champion. He was the NWA Tri-States North American Heavyweight Champion. NWA Tag Team Champ with Snuka. NWA Heavyweight Champ. Well, let me ask you, do you think your dad ever wanted to be like the WWF champion?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Now I will tell you, we had a conversation a couple of different times. They offered him the Intercontinental, and to him that was a
step down.
That was like insulting.
Yeah.
And everybody has a different perspective. Like when I hear people talk about these championships, I'm like, y'all know this is like this is for money. Like this isn't like that. Their goal of getting it had nothing to do with the belt and everything to do with the paycheck that came with it.
Right.
And so there was ego involved, as you can imagine.
Of course.
Hogan is a politician. I said that before recent events. Like and listen, that's a good business decision. Dad had a temper, and I'll say it this way: when Hogan came out and he was the title, He beat the Iron Sheik for it, and it became a red, white, and blue, right? Like he became synonymous with, a good American. And this is during the Reagan administration. And you throw out on top of that the Cold War, right? Like America, we're building. The time it took for that show, because this is territory still. It's just kind of eventually going mainstream. So California may not see that show for 2 weeks. You can't change the title that fast. People wouldn't know. They would be rooting for something for 2 weeks that had already changed. So the time frame in which my dad come up, if he'd come out, was a little bit younger and come out a couple years later, I think he does get the belt, right? But during that time, as Vince is building his brand, Roddy, he was a partier, right? My dad had a temper. Like you had to be able to trust your entire brand with them. It like the brand at that point wasn't big enough, right? So to me, that was a strategic decision. It wasn't anything against anybody. Simply took that long for some of the shows to even make it across the United States, right? So I don't think I think my dad wanted it. I think he wanted the paycheck. I think there's all that. There's the ego behind it, but it doesn't mean what it wants. It doesn't mean now what it once meant, right? Because back then there wasn't that many belts.
Right.
It just was a different animal.
Yeah. My stance on that is back then when you're the belt carrier, you had the company on your back and you were the driving force. But those people that he wrestled, Hogan wrestled, those were the ones that helped driving this force. And nowadays it's the belt is given to you to help the wrestler get over, where before the belt was to the one who actually had to carry. And your dad was right. I heard, can't remember what guy said it. It was George the Animal Steel. He talked about your dad and said that your dad was like a great wrestler, and that everyone knew that he could take that belt whenever he wanted. And that's the reason why they didn't give him the belt, because everyone knew that, the fans' perspective, the fans knew that any time your dad wanted the belt, he was going to get it. And
he had the most title matches with Hogan, and I don't think there were 11 title matches, and they had, and Hogan said this, that that dad was the best wrestler because he got the most out of him. Of any wrestler he wrestled with, he said, Paul got the most out of me. And, again, going back to that kid that played football and had found this gear that nobody could go at, right? It was controlled chaos, and sometimes it was just chaos, but more often than not, it was like Dad had a rough childhood. He went through some things. The fact that I am the man I am today, if you add him up with what he went through and me, what I went through, there's only one thing that fixes that equation, which is God. Because there's no reason he should have been a loving father that,
he broke the cycle.
He broke the cycle. And I think he and his dad were close, but his dad was an alcoholic. All the stories of my dad bare knuckle fighting was to pay a tab, and like that was real life for him. And so him not choosing alcohol and finding sports, that was his way out of the trailer parks. And so here's the funny thing. I just saw this the other day. In the Hebrew, in the Old Testament, they use the word wonderful in Isaiah, and the word actually means miracle.
Oh.
And I was like, that's pretty crazy, because dad's and most of those guys came from hell. Dad's ascent doesn't make sense on paper, but he channeled those demons in a way that I think and not always the right way, but that's how demons work. He was able to use all that aggression, energy, anger, angst, and put it into a match. The reason it was believable is because that was him fighting his inner child. That's really how he felt. Like when you see him at the workout, like give you an example, we did the him working out with the lady, and like he's making fun. He's like, "Oh, you're arguing with me, do 25, do 40, quit arguing. You probably just sit around the table." Like part of that's true for him. Like those are things he said, like not exactly as insulting because he wasn't that way. In fact, if you made fun of somebody with special needs or anything, like Dad would, you'll regret it. He was very protective. He was the bully that beat up the bullies.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, like there was this like way about Dad, the way he kind of lived life. Like it's kind of like that was method acting. Like he just kind of let loose his thoughts that he wouldn't really say. But I was in the truck with him. Some of that stuff came out every once in a while, right? Like, and so like I remember we were talking about eating. Like my dad had a motto, and he would look at you and say it: "Eat to live, not live to eat." And the only time I ever remember, and it was food was different back in the '80s, but the only time I ever remember Dad indulging was we live in Atlanta, and we would pass the Krispy Kreme donuts, and the hot donut sign was on. If it was off, we didn't stop. But if it was on, Dad was like buying a milk and drinking it, killing a dozen before we got home. Like that, and that was like, I mean, it was rare, right? But yeah, the way he approached life in general, and this may be the one thing I know I did inherit from him, is we just do everything very intense, and we I'm not comparing myself to him in that way. My mouth moves as fast as his body is what I've convinced myself of. But he, there's people meet me and they're like, "Dude, where did you get that energy?" I'm like, "Listen, if I could give it away for a day, I would. I'm tired." Like, and that's how he was when he went to the gym. He damn near hurt himself because he was going to push himself so hard, right? Like that's the gear he has, and it made everything he did 100% believable.
Yeah.
And so for that time frame, and considering the guys that came up, like I hear people talk about different wrestlers, like, "Oh, they were great technician in the ring," and I'm like, they move like it doesn't matter. Like, yes, they can do the move, but it's it's not. There's nothing behind it. I don't believe that you want to do the move. I think you know what you're supposed to do, and it it might be smooth, but it's like, but I don't think you can do that. Like when my dad did a move, I'm like, man, that dude's arm is going to be hurting later. And sometimes I think if they didn't give their all, they were. Dad didn't hold back on that. He never hurt anybody unless you hurt somebody else.
So after your dad left WWF, he went down to WCW for a little while, and he ended up winning some championships there. And then he created a tag team with Paul Roma, and I believe they got the gold belts there as well. His WCW time, were you more involved with him during that period?
So when he was at WWF, I traveled with him a lot. Like there would be weeks where I'd go on the road with him, at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So I grew up in a dressing room. That's why I always tell people, like, man, Big John Studd, I'm like in his underwear. It's not like I'm sure he's a good dude. Like I know his son, we connect, but like I have a completely different version of what like
an image you'd probably like to forget.
Yeah, listen, there's a reason I started drinking. I'm convinced that was it. But no, I played cards with him. Like I learned how to play poker and spades, and Nick Patrick put a guitar in my hand for the first time when we were on the road, and he was practicing in the dressing room. And so there were periods where I would spend,
a week with these guys. And when I was 13, I went to Australia and spent 21 days on the road with them. Like there wasn't a time I wasn't really traveling with them in a given year. We'd go down to Florida when they were filming. I'd be down there for 2 months. And, I'm just walking up like, hey, my dad's calling. They're like, yeah, yeah. I'm walking in past all these lines. And, I remember the first time I had to fly coach, I was like, this sucks. I was working for a company. I was so spoiled by the Delta Sky Miles, right? Like everywhere we went, we kind of had, a privileged thing, as long as dad was working. But, the time in WCW, what was nice about that, and even more so the power plant. So during that period of WCW, like I spent time with wrestlers because they would come over to the house and go, like Steve Austin, Rick Rude. They were my dad's hunting buddies, right? So in fact, I saw Steve Austin posted this picture of this like 1987 Toyota pickup, and when I got this Nissan hardbody pickup, he made fun of it and said it was a little toy, and he was going to put it in the back of his truck. And I don't know if you ever said it, but I responded. I was like, I had a truck that size, and you made fun of it. So I Rick Steiner, those guys came over, and I had these interactions, and you'd be floored how humble and actually kind of introverted they are. Like they're not. Bobby Heenan, complete opposite. He talked more than me. I thought it was the craziest thing ever. I'd never met anybody that could keep up with me. He is the most quick-witted person I have ever met, without question. And God, the stuff he did to my dad is just priceless. How he lived is just beyond me. But, oh man, it's brutal. But like that time frame of WCW, what was so much fun about it at the time was I was like 18 years old. So, I was going to clubs sometimes with some of the wrestlers that were getting trained, or, I had exposure. I was supposed to go on a date with a girl that was, in training. I bartended at a restaurant downtown Atlanta at the time, So during those years up until the power plant, or through the power plant, he was home. Like they weren't out on the road as much, right? Like they would go do Halloween Havoc in Vegas or whatever, but then they were back home. So he was I always say dad wasn't always there, but he was always present. Like when he was home, whether it be when I was younger and playing baseball, I mean, he'd come there in those booty shorts and, the coach, and he'd bring like a lawn chair from our house, put it in the back of his pickup. He'd back it up and he would sit there without a shirt on, watching me play, baseball, getting a tan at the same time. I consider that he was multitasking as far as I'm concerned, but, like hearing the women talk about him and, like, I'm like, you're my friend's mom. Stop, please. Those years, he was really involved. And so, but we talked a lot, and believe it or not, I actually do listen sometimes, but when I'm interviewing, it's easier for me, but my mind starts thinking of 100 things anyway. But yeah, like those periods of time, like I could go spend time. And I remember the first time I met Paul Heyman, and I had not seen JYD in like 7 years and ran into him again when he was at WCW. So these guys I kind of grew up around, like I went and saw Nick Patrick. He's got a show called Deep South down here in Atlanta. I was able to go up and give him a big hug, and I remember running into him and his son that he takes care of, that he just adores, strong as can be, by the way. So there's these relationships that they might have been very short-lived, but there was connection. And inside of that world, those guys are really lonely. And I mean, think about it. At one point in time, you go back to the hotel, it's like 3 channels, right? There's not much. Why do you think they went out and did what they did? One, they were already inclined, and 2, there was nothing to do, which is why my dad lived inside of a gym most of the time. So there was these, and I didn't care what they did. I didn't care if they had a title. Like dad got to the point with the title, he's like, I hate having a title because I got to carry it around from place to place, But dad, and during those years was very, very, very present. He was there when I graduated high school. He didn't miss my graduation, and he took me out for my first beer when I was 21, and we would go shoot guns, and he would overcooked barbecue, and I remember he overcooked everything, and I remember thinking I just thought I just didn't like food, and then I was like, oh, I didn't know you could make this medium rare. Like, this is amazing. I hated steak. I was like, man, it's so hard to chew. But like we would cook barbecue together. I got a smoker, and he would come over, and we would spend the day, and like my dad would pick up my son on Thursdays from school, and like he taught my nephew how to hunt,
That's
and there's all these things that you would miss out on about his life if you didn't understand this one thing. He didn't do that for the fame. He did that to take care of his family. Fame's just what comes with it, right? And I don't think any of those men would have done anything different, because I don't think they had another choice. There was no other choice for them to go out and do what they do, unless they had an outlet for it. And so wrestling, to me, my version or view of it has changed over the last 46 years, and it's really a microcosm of real life. Sometimes you're the bad guy, sometimes you're the good guy. Just depends on the person in front of you. Because I'll tell you, there's many people in my life that I am a cool breeze. They've never seen me upset. They've never seen me drink. They always see me go, well, let me think about that. And then there's the people that remember me, and I'm the hurricane. And I've been that in the same room.
wow. Yeah. I seen that you posted, or at least you put it on your YouTube. It was an interview with your dad, and he talked about, after he hurt his arm, or got his arm hurt, that he was told that he shouldn't have gone back into wrestling. But he had said that that's the only thing I knew. And I have job. I mean, I have a family. I have bills I have to pay. And I had to go back. And
when he left in 87, two things were going on. 87, 88. One, I got deathly ill. Like, they genuinely said to my dad, and my mom joked one time, she's like, I'm surprised the doctor didn't press charges, because I guess the doctor said, we think he has a brain tumor, and like he adjusted the doctor's shirt against the wall, and so that was going on. My brother had gotten in a bunch of trouble, so he had been arrested, and he spent a lot of time behind bars. And when people would ask, they'd be like, what does your brother do? And again, playing kayfabe, we were like, he works for the state. Like that's like that was part, like, we were taught to lie. I have to tell you, like, you can call it kayfabe, it's lying is what it is. And that was very difficult as a child to figure out how to go from which world at the same time, and you end up lying about everything because you don't know you lose sight of all of it, right? But yeah.
All right. I'm gonna switch gears just for a second. You talked about having your issues and how you found peace with it. Well, kind of peace with it, finding religion and finding God. How are you doing? Are you doing great on? Because I know you talked about how you're going through, and tell me if I'm wrong. Was it AA, going through the 12 steps program? And
so I will say I grew up in the church. Now here's the irony of it. I grew up in a church that men were this is what they preach, that men shouldn't wear shorts and women shouldn't wear pants. And my dad has underwear on television. So like, that's a conflict, right? And yet all these people liked him. So it was very difficult for me to navigate that. But at the age of 18, I came to believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross and was resurrected. So that was something that I believed. Here's the problem. I didn't unlearn everything that I had experienced from the time I was 18. I still had the same skill set, and I still had the same tools to deal with life. Now, did I do everything in my power to reach out and to try to deal with that? Absolutely. I remember I went to college and I went through my first semester. I was going for congregational studies and I come back and it's summertime and my car gets repossessed. My mom didn't tell me she didn't pay the bill. So I had to go to work. Well, come to find out when I went to close on my house 7 years later, my mom lied, didn't pay the college tuition that she said she did. So I had to, pay that. Like there was chaos around me and I was trying to deal with the chaos inside me.
Yeah.
And so, going back to when I was 9, that was when they started giving me Percocet. And so, at the age of 9 years old, they were trying to figure out how to deal with my pain. Not as many pharmaceuticals available back in 1987, 88. And so I experienced that, came off that. Every few years, I would have that same thing happen, but I got a little more resilient. And so, but they would put me back on pain. Go ahead.
I just did you end up having a brain tumor, or did they find out?
No, I didn't. They never, so we never got a clear diagnosis. And I'll say, I've gotten so many diagnostics over the years. I've taken every blood test you can imagine. They don't know why I have what I have, but it'll make more sense. So
Okay.
it happened every few years. I would go back on pain meds for a few weeks. And here's the thing about pain meds, and even alcohol. The effects of alcohol, medically speaking, 5 drinks at once or 15 drinks in a week is the clinical definition of alcohol. And so if I ask you how much do you drink, most people would say occasionally. Well, we all think of the word occasionally differently. It's just Eleanor, stop. Sorry. We think of the word occasionally and we have our own definition. We don't know that we have our own definition until we ask somebody else, what does occasionally mean? If you ask if you believe in God, people have different definitions of who God is. Like I'll tell you one, and just because I find it to be hilarious, but the word testify comes from an experience that happened with the Romans, and during the Roman Empire, where a man and another man would grab each other's testicles in a show of trust. Hence the word testify. So
Nathan, don't try to testify with Texan.
no, yeah, I tell people all the time, I'm like, I don't testify to anything. Just so you
Sounds
know.
more like a family thing between you two.
Yeah. So my point behind that is the word meditate had the same definition till 1913 to 1970. And even the words of the definition that came from Oxford took them 70 years to put the dictionary together from A to Z. And it was like 1929, I think, when they finished. And how they found the quotations. And obviously it's evolved. We have 500,000 words. So from those time frames, I would be put on opiates. I did not recognize or understand, and I don't think any of us did, the neurological changes that happen to somebody that's either using alcohol or an opiate for any kind of extended period of time. But I would go on and off them. Well, guess what? I would come in and I'd say, I'm depressed. Well, I had no idea what post-acute withdrawals were because nobody brought up I'd just come off of opiates like 3 weeks later, right? Or 3 weeks prior. So when I turned 19, all of the introvertedness, all of the, kind of the shame, embarrassment, not knowing how to deal with things, people started feeding me a beer here and there. And I'm like, oh my God, like I can do all the things I want to do, say all the things I want to say, and I don't have all this anxiety. Well, that turned into partying, and I grew up around it, and so I was desensitized to the thought of, like, when people talk about cocaine, like I had seen it when I was 7. You don't like it's until I would get around people and I would share a story and I'm kind of giggling and they're not, and they've got that look of, oh my God, that is traumatic. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was a joke, right? Like my experiences have a different meaning if you didn't grow up around all this craziness. Well, I struggled with alcohol, and so through my 20s, I was able to. I had a family, I had a career, I did well at my career. Certainly not maximizing on my potential, and the drinking just kept getting worse. And I would have periods where I would stop, and periods when I would go. In the meantime, I'm taking opiates every few years. Well, after I turned 30 and almost destroyed everything I had, I ended up rebuilding myself, quit drinking, took care of my body, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? Eventually I fell back into it. So there was these periods of it, and then move forward to when I was 35 and I broke my arm. I go into the hospital. They tell me they have to have an emergency surgery to save my arm. They didn't recognize at that point that the bone had gone through the nerve. They just knew that there was no blood flow and my hand didn't work and it was paralysis. They found that after they did the surgery. So, they cut my tendons right here, moved my finger tendons over. Well, when I came out of that hospital, and even while I was there, they had put me on 12 Percocet, 10 milligram, 12 150 milligram tramadol, and 9,000 milligrams of gabapentin, all of which is 3 times the legal dose for any of it now. And I was taking 2 Percocet at 12, 2 tramadol at 2, 2 Percocet at 4. And I took pills 24 hours a day. In a month, I'm back in the gym. And I'm like making motions. And I didn't say I was smart. I just said I was back in the gym. So I thought I could outwork it. Go back to work because I needed to go back to work. I was working at the bank at that point. And I went back within 8 weeks. And I'm falling asleep in front of people because I'm on so much pain meds. Well, over a year passes, they figure out they can't fix my arm. I start weaning off the pain meds. And by that next June, so I broke it in August, so that next June, I started having insomnia. I went a month without sleeping. I started having, I started having panic attacks, severe. And nobody once said to me, hey, you just came off an excessive amount of medicine. Your brain takes 14 months to neurologically recover from that type of use. Now, looking back, I go, why did I listen to the doctors? But they were doctors. We weren't as skeptical as we are today about all this, right? So at 35, I had a surgery on the 50 staples elbow to chest. They moved everything to work. My trap works instead of my shoulder because my rotator cuff and labrum were torn. It was destroyed. And I learned to be left-handed for 3 years till I had that surgery. Well, while I was carrying things, I moved my back so a disc had come out and sit on my nerve. So I had to have that disc removed. And so for 5 years, I was on and off pain pills. And I would, and in the middle of it, I would start drinking because I couldn't even sleep. And man, it was hell. It was I thought in my 20s I drank. This was hell. And my mental health, I remember going to a doctor and he's like, you're bipolar. And I'm like, I wasn't last year. What happened? And it wasn't until 10 years later, so about a year ago, that somebody said, has anybody ever told you were overprescribed? And I'm like, no. And I've told 100 doctors how much they gave me, and so 5 years ago, after having a back surgery, that was my third surgery, a platelet-rich plasma injection in my elbow, bionic man, $300,000 arm.
Wow.
Learned to write again, learned to use my right hand again, physical therapy pretty much the whole time. But my mental health is destroyed and my addictions are getting worse. And finally, after that time, I had my last surgery and my pain doctor said, you should try marijuana. And I had smoked a couple times when I was 18, but it wasn't something that I preferred or enjoyed. It was about 3 months later, somebody talked me into trying it. I tried it and I was like, hey, I'm not in pain. This might actually help. The fallacy behind that is the THC levels that we see in modern day, drugs are not the same. A kid, you're talking about 11, 12%, now they're 30% or upwards of even 80% THC. So we're seeing psychosis in kids that we didn't see from, what we could consider the OG marijuana.
Right.
But I started smoking. So it kind of put things at bay. But I had done some craziness over that 5-year span that I had never done. It cost me my marriage. And I had to rebuild. And so from there, I smoked, but I was in pain every day in my arm and in my legs, even after the back surgery. And then
over a 5-year span, I used marijuana. I drank after my dad died. That was the first time I had drank in like 2 years. And I drank regularly for about a year. And then my depression got so bad, I'm like, man, this isn't working. And so I went to a counselor. And so I had my faith, but what I didn't know how to do is how to do it. Like, I talk to people all the time about like the purpose of AA, the purpose of Celebrate Recovery, the purpose of faith is to give you a way to live a principled life and be better than who you are by your own instincts. Because I am by nature selfish, and I am by nature look at the world, and I'm actually looking at a mirror as I start to describe what goes on around me. And so I went to a counselor, like, and I'm telling you, like, I did anything and everything they said. And the work I had done when my dad died, and was still there, but there was that struggle after his death. So I had probably 7 years before that really started to explore my faith again at like 38 years old. Got back in the church and started kind of asking these questions about, is this really what I want in my life, who I want to be, how I, at this point, it's like how I want to die, right? Because I thought death was inevitable. Like the fact that I'm sitting here, still a little bit of a shock. Yeah. So I had the marijuana for about a 5-year stretch, and I kept having issues. And I finally looked at my counselor. I was like, I don't know if I'm addicted to this stuff or if I need it. But what I can tell you is I can't go more than a few hours without it, or I start panicking. And so, at that point, after all this time, I knew where my faith was. I knew what I believed, and I knew who I wanted to be. I had that nailed. I did not know how to do it. Yeah. And I went to a very, very nice wellness center, and I had a room and my TV, and I got away from marijuana for a little over a month. And it took about 2 weeks for the side effects to go away. But I came to find out that about 70% of people that use marijuana when they quit have severe side effects. And I didn't sleep for several weeks. And so after a couple of weeks, my heart rate started to go down. My metabolism started to level out. Like things started to get clear. I didn't have the anxiety that I was having. And I heard something when I was there. It was a very simple sentence. And it was, this is really where I went, I get it. And the sentence was simple. Acceptance is the answer to all of your problems today. And so what I came to, and I promise I'll wrap this up, was I still have physical pain. I had to have a back surgery. They had to put a cage in. My back had collapsed. I had lost about 1.5 inches height. They went through the stomach and through the back. I was left without sacrum joint injections, without sacrum joints. So I have unbearable pain from the waist down. I have neuropathy every day. I have my arm that's obviously always in pain, but I found a way to do it without anything addictive. A lot of that requires management. That's why my diet is so on point. If I have processed foods, I feel it. I have to, I spend a lot of time at home sometimes, but I chose at that point back then, I'm done doing anything that is going to negatively affect my mental health. And I think I can accept this moment as it is. And from there, and people call it their sober day. For me, that was my surrender day. I surrendered to thinking I had the answer, because what I came to realize is I'm the worst therapist I've ever had, without question.
I think we all are, yeah.
We all are, and we spend so much time between these 2 years. So I did find a fellowship, and I saw this guy, right? And this guy was at the front of the room, and he was sharing. The dude is like 6'4", 270, shaved, everything. He is just busting out of his shirt, and reminded me of my dad in that way. I'm like, that dude's got my gear. Maybe not the same like that, because I can't physically do it. But I knew I was having trouble walking. I mean, I was on a walking chair for a while. It was like the third time I've had to walk again. But I saw him, and he was so tender. And I went, a man with that much strength, with that much tenderness, That's who my dad was when he was good. And I'm like, I want what that guy has. And so for several weeks, I actually prayed about it. And I would show up that Tuesday and he wouldn't be there. And next Tuesday he wasn't there. And the third Tuesday I didn't go. A month goes by and I've thought about this guy for an entire month. And I think I'm losing my mind. I'm like, this, but in my heart, I believe like God was saying, that's your guy. And I walk in the room. I haven't seen this guy in a month. I had sat in the back and I had just said my name. And I walk in, and before I go in, I go, God, could you make this introduction happen? Because I really could use like a lifeline here.
Right.
And I walked in. He walked right up to me, put out his hand, and he goes, "Hey, Travis, it's good to see you again." And it had been a month, and I had sat in the back, and he had remembered me. And I sat down and I said, "I need your help." And so I called that dude every day for like 6 months. And we started to break down all of these things I was resentful about. I came to a place where I'm like, I'm going to surrender my will over to God's because, I kept thinking I played God. Like I did play God. I wanted to control what you thought so you didn't think bad of me. All of my motivations weren't for the betterment of people. They were so I got recognition and validation. And I'm like, that's not a life. So I found this principle way of living. And it's what I suggest. If you don't know the answer, you're the only one that can diagnose yourself. But most people, I'd say this because it was said to me and it was so meaningful. Alcohol was never my problem. I was my problem.
Right.
And alcohol was my solution to this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the combination of that fellowship, that man, and my faith became intertwined. And it was like, oh, I got this, right? But I still had to go out. And so for last year, because I was still struggling, and I've been fortunate enough that I worked for a company that took care of me because after I had to have another back surgery and all that stuff, just a couple of years ago. So I was able to stay on board and still work for them, but I was allowed to be at home and do some things. So I came to a place where I went, I need to figure out what's really going on in this because I don't want what happened to me from a doctor. Not that I didn't already have my demons. I didn't want to go like that was hell. The two of them are not comparable. So last year, a close friend said, "Hey, are you willing to talk to people that are struggling with addiction and mental health?" And I said, yes. And he said, "We got this little nonprofit, would you mind taking it over?" I said, "Sure." So the 4 years prior, they had about 950 calls. And I think most of them got a phone call back, but not all of them. I spent about 10 months there. And in 10 months, we did 1,250 calls. So we did more in 10 months than they'd done 5 years total. And we were able to place and help people get into insurance, which got them into treatment, or we helped them as they finish treatment get into a sober living facility. So we think, the math, I was able to vet and assign and get us on budget to help around 700 people get into treatment last year. And Carl Jung said this: if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. Because when I think my life's bad and I go help another person, man, I always tell people, like, I did not know what I would get out of being of service. And it's the coolest thing is I always would love my title of being Mr. Wonderful Son because it gave me significance. I was a vice president, I was an executive, all these different titles that I had attached myself to. It was about 6 months in, and I got a handwritten letter from a probation officer. And she's like, "I can tell this isn't a job to you, just a job to you." And I called her because I knew her. I was like, "Hey, I got your note." That was like, "Thank you so much." I was like, "I don't work here." She's like, "What?" And I'm like, I do this volunteer. And I didn't mean that. And like, I'm not trying to bring attention that way. Like, the title of volunteer has been the best title that has ever been given, to be of service to others for no other reason than you're like, hey, I know I have a skill set, a knowledge, and a personal experience. And there was a point where somebody wanted to get out of jail and get into treatment. And I was like, I don't want to help this dude.
And I called my buddy and I said, yo, like in my body, I don't want to help this dude. He goes, are you resentful towards your brother? I was like, oh crap, like, and so I had to sit there and deal with all those, Saturday mornings we would drive to visit him in prison, and I became an advocate for these people. Like, not only did I make peace and I have a relationship with my brother today, he's out, like we have a relationship we've never had in our entire lives, and it's not perfect, but there's some growth. That all came about because I made myself available and I had no clue what it would do for my spirit and my soul. So that's where my journey is. When I talk about, addiction, it's not a willpower thing. This is a medical condition as described since 1951. It is not like, if willpower is all it was, then nobody would ever break a diet, ever.
Right.
Everybody would be thin. Everybody would be at the gym 6 days a week. So when you look at diet and even you look at like addiction, alcohol or whatever, there's a cutoff point at about 14 days. Everybody gives up. They go back to drinking. They go back to sugar. It's not because you don't have willpower. It's you have a neurological dopamine fix that you've given up and you're depressed and you don't know how to get through that period of depression. Being overweight is now a medical condition. It's not just you overeat. You're eating stuff, 10,000 food additives in this country that have hacked our dopamine response and reward system. So all these changes that have happened to us neurologically through the advent of the phone, which is basically an existential crisis right in your pocket. My ability to manage the social media pages. When somebody says something negative, I don't interact with them. I just delete it. They don't know, but I don't let anybody come to our site and think or do anything negative, because that's not what I want to give out to the world. I have hope, peace, joy, energy, purpose. And I got that because I surrendered that I wasn't God, which seems to be obvious to most people, but it was very confusing for me. Bobby, I feel like you haven't said anything, man. Like,
most of the time.
I say I'm a little under the weather, and I keep muting my microphones. My wife and kids just got home and are making a lot of noise.
Yeah, they do that. They're actually they're built to do that.
I give him a lot of crap too, because the topics that I come up with, and I speak my point of view on them. Sometimes I'll sit there and wait for him to actually say something about it. Like, well, you're part of this. Chime in.
It's got to be something. I think you're being authentic, and that's all that matters. I mean, listen, some people, like, they absorb it. Like, the fact that he's here, like, obviously I recognize it. If he wanted to join in, he would bring something. And if he doesn't have anything, he's like, I'm good not saying anything. I struggle with that. So when I say, like, as a compliment, like, I've said a couple times, like, I'm pretty sure I was born with a full vocabulary.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. I've never been the talker.
I've never been the listener, so I'm getting better at it. My girlfriend says I'm good at it. So.
One thing real quick, we're 5 minutes away, coming up on 2 hours. How long did you guys want to go?
Well, I mean, I was going to get along to wrapping it up because I didn't want to take too much of your time, Travis, but I
actually just shut off everything tonight so that I was available to you. So at least I could do after, like, not showing up last time. So my girlfriend left at like 3 o'clock, and she actually texted me because I told her that I had screwed up, like, on the 17th or whatever. And so I said, yeah, I got the podcast. And she texted me like 6:30. She's like, quit texting me. I'll talk to you later. Get ready for the podcast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Shout out to your girlfriend.
The reason why I wanted to bring up your personal issues is because I feel that you've handled them, or at least you got them kind of under control. And I wanted to kind of close everything up with a positive, vibe. And in just your last podcast, I'm just going to chime in, was with a guy in a fish shop in Canada. And I felt that. Yeah, I felt that podcast was incredible too, because it enlightened me about alcohol, about it being linked to cancer, and I never would have put the two together.
I'm gonna nerd out real quick, Jim. Let me just nerd out for 1 second. Here's the deal. Your stomach is the bed for everything in your body, and if it's the foundation, whether it's the food you eat, drink. There's a reason why you have an upset stomach when you're upset, right? Like it hurts in your stomach. There are everything from your dopamine, your serotonin, your satiation. It is all connected to your stomach, period. And it is, whatever you put in your mouth is what will go to your brain in some capacity. So the simplest thing to put it would be if you look at ghrelin, when you go to eat, your body tells your stomach to produce a hormone called ghrelin. You eat food, the amino acids attached to it, it sends a signal back and says you're satiated. What they've done with our food is they've removed all the amino acids. So when you eat, your brain says, well, I haven't eaten anything yet. So it keeps allowing you to consume. So if I gave you a bag of potato chips, you could eat it, but if I gave you 5 baked potatoes, you'd get through 2 and go, I'm done. It's the reason people get the meat sweats. It's a ton of amino acids in meat. So with alcohol, like antibiotics destroy your entire microbiome. Your stomach is full of bacteria, good or bad. And all of that bacteria that you build up, you create a foundation with it. When you drink, and listen, I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I sincerely am not telling you the science because I wish I had known. I don't think it would necessarily change anything. But, like I now have an insight that I go, man, I have reason, because I think I'm like 490 days, and I had quit drinking. So I had quit drinking before I came to that point. Why I call it my surrender date. It was when I quit playing God. That I needed it, because most everything I was on for the last 7 years was prescribed, but it almost killed me and broke me mentally. And I would occasionally drink, but it wasn't like it was a beer or two, right? So with alcohol, like antibiotics, it destroys everything in your stomach, which means whatever you put in your mouth after you've done that, your stomach doesn't have the bacteria to break down the food to give you the amino acids. You also got this immediate reward, right? I always say people are like, oh, drinking makes you depressed. I'm like, not if you do it right. Like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. The problem is when you drink, you get you have this account. I always call it, this is your savings account of happiness. You get dopamine and serotonin. Like, you get those in a rush. You feel good. The next day, you've overdrafted your account. There's nothing to give you back. So now you have destroyed everything in your stomach. When you eat, it doesn't make you feel better. And then the way alcohol works, ketosis is similar, but your brain converts the alcohol because it's a macronutrient: proteins, fats, carbs, alcohol. When you drink, you now have destroyed everything your stomach would do, which is why it's linked to every cancer, because your diet is what, I don't want to get into mitochondria, but you look at what happens with alcohol, and then this is where it gets scary. It's the only substance that I've ever known that destroys families and homes when it's done at excessive levels, that people will make fun of you if you say you don't do it. I was at a restaurant. I said, oh, I don't drink. I'll just have water. She goes, oh, so you don't like having fun? I was like, actually, like, oh, it happens all the time. So alcohol, and again, the problem is us, right? And then, so why you're drinking. What I can tell you is the lie that a glass of wine is good for you, that's not true. I'm not saying they didn't used to drink wine and beer in the times of antiquity. By the way, they also didn't have tap water or filtered water. Like, sometimes that was the safest thing to drink without getting a disease. But alcohol is the one substance that you can die from when you detox. What happens is, because it is a
amino acid because your body metabolizes it. It converts the alcohol through your liver and makes it your food for your brain. So your brain starts running on alcohol because your liver converts it to acetate or acetone. So you start operating on it. That's why you get a headache when you don't drink it. It creates a brain synapses after you do it enough times over a period of time that if you don't drink, your brain starts telling your body you're starving. And so when people go into detox from the ages of 23 and on, I've seen it. You will find people that their body will shut down because their brain starts telling their body that they're starving, and it starts to shut down their organs. So I've met people that went in for meth, fentanyl, marijuana, alcohol. I've seen it, all of them. And I've talked to all those people at those points. And I've met people that were on heroin. I'm not saying, because the most dangerous one is fentanyl. It kills, over 110,000 people per year is kind of the average right now of people that die from overdose that we know. But alcohol is the one that when you detox from, that's the one that will kill you. The other ones are painful, right? Like they're hard to do. And the thing is, whether you go on a diet and want to lose weight or you want to quit drinking alcohol, there's something that is magical that happens when you get in a community of people that have like-minded goals. The reason a gym works is because you're around people that work out. The reason that these recovery programs work is you're around people that don't want to don't do it anymore. And so I've met people that have 40 years of sobriety. I don't know what my path looks like for the rest of my life. What I can tell you is I didn't drink today and I haven't smoked today, and I've had no desire to do that ever again. But I know I won't do it today, and I can guarantee I won't do it tomorrow by the grace of God. Because the way that I found Christianity was hard to do was this idea that I had to never sin again, right?
Yeah.
What I came to find out, I'm just trying to stack up doing the right next thing. And that I can do. I can ask somebody, hey, is this who God would have me be? Like, is this really being principled in this relationship and how I'm talking to these people? Because when I'm me, bad things happen. Like I have to get rid of myself. When I pull up to places, I actually sit there and pray, God, let me be of service to whomever I interact with. Because I take myself out of the equation. I'm kinder, I'm more patient, and I've gotten to observe God's miracles. But when you see people give up alcohol or go on a diet, if you only go to detox, 99+% people relapse. If you go to detox and then a 30-day program, because everybody thinks, like it's just like working out for 30 days. It doesn't really do you any good. Like you got to do this as a lifestyle. But somebody puts, if they only go to a 30-day program, 95% of them relapse. If they go to an extended program, most of them are about 90 to 120 days, 66% of the people relapse. So 99% relapse, 95%, 66%. If you then go from there into a community and you stay in that community for 3 years, whether it's your diet or giving up a substance, 90% of people after 3 years do not relapse. 95% of people that go on a diet and stick with it for 3 years, 95% of people do not put the weight back on.
Wow. 3 years.
There's something about that 3-year mark, but we are sold. And believe me, if anybody had a problem, I'd just go to treatment and 30 days will fix it. It takes 14 months before your brain and your stomach completely heals. It can be expedited with diet and exercise. But the bottom line is, and I say this because for me, it is not a coincidence. If it took Jesus 3 years to teach his disciples, why do we think we can get it done in 30 days? Like, that's so illogical. And again, I'm not telling anybody what you need to believe. I only know what I believe, and I respect whatever you come to. This is where I've come and what has worked for me in my life. What I would tell you, and the last thing I'll say is, once I understood that I could connect with another human being and be of service, all those things that I thought were so bad in my life, they gave me perspective. I now use those things to warn and help other people.
Yeah.
It has changed my heart in a way that I can't fully describe, because you'd have to know how much chaos was going on the inside when I acted like everything was okay.
Yep.
Right. And there are relationships I'll never be able to make amends for. And I have to accept that. What I know I can do is live in a way that makes amends for the things I did. And I'll let God do the rest.
There you go. Wow. Have you ever thought about getting into being a pastor or a leadership? Well, I guess you're pretty much a leadership, but like in the church.
No, to be honest
No?
with you. But here's what I'll say about that. So there's the story in the Bible of Jesus, and they talk about that he leaves the 99, the good shepherd leaves the 99 sheep for the one that is lost. And I'm speaking next Wednesday at not this coming Wednesday, but the next Wednesday. I'm speaking to give my testimony of everything we kind of talked about in front of, about 500 people. Whatever door that opens up, I'm good with. If it doesn't open a door, I'm good with that too. I just try to put out something good to the world and say, hey, you know what? I'm not saying I've got the answer for you. I can just tell you what worked for me and make suggestions. Some people were meant to shepherd the 99. I think I'm meant to find the one.
Yeah.
And so that's where I put my place. And that's where I put my purpose.
Awesome. That's awesome. And I've got more out of this than I ever thought I was going to. But and that's why I was doing my research too, and found out how amazing it is that you're respecting your dad, keeping your dad's memories alive and his work, and then your personal challenges and what you went through and how you're overcoming them.
The grace of God, and again, what I would say is, wonderful means miracle.
Yeah. If someone never met your father or watched your father, and we can end with this, what would you tell someone about your dad?
Oh.
Got him on this one.
His grandkids called him Pawpaw. My mom called him everything. I called him Daddy, and you called him Mr. Wonderful.
That is awesome. Can't say any much better than that. Travis, it's been a pleasure. I know we took more of your time than I initially wanted to, but I just felt we were on a roll.
I'm living in my purpose, bro. Like, if I wasn't supposed to be here, there's a reason that night didn't happen. I don't know what it was, but I know that if you guys, get anything out of my journey and this message meets somebody that, I used to look at the world in a way where I had to achieve what my dad did, right? And I alluded to this before, but man, there is one person that might watch this that is hopeless. There's one person that might watch this that thinks there's no way I can get out of this. There's no reason to live. And if we get the opportunity, and I always say, man, I'm a farmer. All I do is plant seeds. I am not responsible for the growth. So if one person hears this and says there's a way, and he doesn't have to do it my way, he can do it his way, but there is hope. If that happens, how good is our life that we got to touch one human being that will then touch another human being, right? Like, that's our purpose, is to, we get caught up in politics, things that won't matter in 4 years. We put our energy into so many things. Enjoy life, enjoy wrestling. It's a beautiful, it's the first soap opera for men. Like, it's the Kardashians before the Kardashians, and still all the same amount of plastic. But we are meant to have joy in this life. And so if somebody sees this and says, if their entire identity is built on wrestling, that's an opportunity, buddy. Like, I am not trying to make fun, but that's only a piece of who we are. We have the opportunity to shape and touch other human beings in a way just by saying I love you, or even better, by showing it. So that's my goal. And if 2 hours of my time means we meet and reach somebody right where they're at, and they go, well, if that guy can do it, and you don't want to know what I went through to get here, I assure you. But if you need help, reach out and I'll walk you through it. And that's all we can do.
That's amazing, man. Yeah. Again, thank you. It's been
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm glad. I agree with you. I'm glad it didn't work out the first time because, I was dead set that we were only going to do an hour the first time just to keep it, simple. And I'm glad we got the extra hour because I think that's what actually is going to mean a lot to a lot of people. So I appreciate your time, and man, I would love to have you back. I think we can still keep going.
Do a catch up. I'm gonna do one thing before I go. I just want you to. What the heck? Hold on. There we go. You see the robes in the back?
Yeah. Nice.
Real quick, what's the story behind the red one? Wasn't there a red one?
I have no clue. Like, no idea. There are some things that went missing during those years. Like, the blue one was out in Texas. I didn't just get that handed to me. It was meant to be mine, and that Wrestling Hall of Fame, went under, and so I had to take some steps to procure it. And so I tried to make sure family got a piece of memorabilia, and then I've kept the rest of it, and it'll stay in our family.
There you go.
So So anyway, I thank you so much, guys. I'm gonna exit because I have 7 pounds of terror up over here.
Same here.
All needs to go attack the world. So thank you, guys. God bless.
God bless. Man, that was I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I think it was very cool.
Oh, it was real good.
Huh?
I was saying it was real good.
Yeah.
We're still recording. We're still recording.
I wish I could be more talkative. Like, I probably woke up about 10 times overnight, like this terrible sinus headache with everything thawing out and stuffed up, and it is not a good day.
Yeah. Plus, you had to do your breaks.
I did do those, but that was only like 2 hours.
Was it the pizza? Pizza made you sick?
Oh, yeah. Could have been. No. So
before we wrap it up, we need to do our Saturday. We have the March 1st show coming.
Oh, yeah. That would, glad you brought that up. So
yeah, that's gonna be another crazy weekend.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. But yeah, so this Saturday you guys can come back down to the Belfair. Man, I can't even talk. Belfair Fairgrounds. SICW comes back. Doors open.
There's Larry too.
Doors open at 6. Show starts at 7. We got multiple cool things happening. The Greg, I'm going to butcher it. George Tregas, Lou Thez, Hall of Fame representatives are going to be in the house. We just got signed on that we're doing it. We're going out to Iowa, Waterloo, Iowa. We're going to do the Hall of Fame out there, put on a great SICW show. So they're going to be in the house. James Jeffries is going to be in the house. Attila Khan's going to come back and be in the house.
Yeah, that's your buddy.
LA Hustlers are coming back. Brandon Beretta is going to be coming back. So we got a stacked house. Main event.
Now, I haven't heard anybody ask about Attila, but I have heard people ask where the LA Hustlers are.
Yeah. And then of course Bobby D is going to be in the house, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
again a crazy weekend, but I'll be there for the show. I won't be there for the tapings.
but as you see it from the poster, the main event is going to be yours truly versus Glenn Williams. Of course, I'm assuming Sean Vincent's going to be in his corner, but I have my plans. I'm not going to air them out because I don't want to give that dastardly guy any way of rethinking how this match is going to go. But yeah, Lariat versus Lariat, part 2. First time, knocked him out within seconds. He just had enough time to give me his Lariat.
I say that was after he lariated you.
Yeah, he lariated me first. Then it phased me. He turned around, and then I got him. I know it's going to be a little bit different now because, he was within his first stages of starting his career, so I'm sure Sean Vincent. Of course, Bobby is wising him up how it goes down in the ring now, too. So,
like I said, I can speak for that I faced him in his early stages to where he was last month, and he has gotten a lot more smart. He's gotten a lot more conniving, and he's got a ton of tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah, so, man, I knew your match, Bobby, and now I'm having problems trying to think about what it was.
I have no idea what it is.
It is. I would call it out as a second main event, because as it states right now, and card is always subject to change. You're in a tag match. I can't remember who your partner is. It might be Jason Breed.
I like Breed. I'll take that.
I think you're going. I know for a fact you're going against Kowalski. I can't remember who his tag partner is. It might be that. Shawn Michaels, Shawn, or is it Shawn Michaels? Michaels something.
I don't even care who it is. When you say Kowalski, that just excites me to get some revenge for last month.
Yes, definitely. So, yeah, come on down this Saturday. Of course, we're going to post this on Thursday. So just 2 days later, Belclair Fairgrounds. Come on over. 6 o'clock, the doors open. Like I said, show starts at 7. Stacked house. The racetrack is going to be there. People there for. I don't know if they're going to be selling tickets to it yet, but I know the George Tragus, Lou Thez, they're going to be selling discounted tickets for the packages because it's a 3-day event. I'm sure it's going to be broken down like ours was for the Fan Fest. Where you can buy You can buy for the dinner that goes along with the Hall of Fame, or you can go for the wrestling show, or I think the first day. That date, I think I would be able to look on my phone, but I want to say it's in July.
It is. It's the weekend after my birthday.
Oh, that's right.
Which is July 16th. So whatever the weekend after that is. I keep saying it's my happy birthday to me.
Yeah, it's a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. But, yeah, so definitely come on down. We're going to have a great time. We're going to put on a hell of a show for you guys.
So 24th, 25th, and 26th. Is
that the weekend after your birthday?
July 16th, my birthday.
All right. Well, hopefully
unless
that's
it's
the correct day.
17th, 18th, and 19th, because your birthday's on a Wednesday, so either or.
Yeah, I think that's what you told me it was. Either way, come down Saturday and you'll find out the correct days because they're going to be there, talking to everyone about it and getting everyone signed up. Had a great weekend. Kind of pizza. The pizza contest didn't quite go mine and Bobby's way.
You wore more than you ate.
That's because I had my face shoved into it.
That's true. That's true.
But either way, me and you did not defeat Kowalski. Kowalski ate more. Of course, he is the bigger one of us 3 too, so that kind of makes sense.
Just to let you know, I just pulled it up on Herb's page. It's July 19th. They got at least that's when he's announcing Wes Briscoe being there. So, there's that span of days.
There you go.
The 17th through the 19th, once I look at the other picture right next to it.
Yeah, there you go. All right, much better. All right.
Well, our broadcaster just failed, so I guess we're done.
Well, are we still recording?
Yeah, we're recording, but the broadcaster failed, so.
Okay, well, let me just throw this in there. Thank you guys, because we're still climbing on subscribers. We broke through that 1,000 mark. We can still need some help, so spread the love. Share this video. Tell your friends and family to subscribe, because we would love to, continue to climb. It's only going to get better.
1103, we need 10,000 by the end of the year. I mean, we don't need it, but we would like it. We want it.
Oh, no, because we need to do bigger and better things. And it's going to help if you subscribe and come along with the journey. But yeah, on that note, thank you for tuning into the Squared Ring podcast. And until next time, we'll see you later.
See you guys.
Have a good night.
Adios.